She was found sitting on the edge of her bathtub, her body weak, her eyes lifeless. The smell in the room was unbearable. Something inside her was decaying, and the man she trusted most was standing right behind her. He didn't call for help. He didn't even move. He just whispered, "Better dead than shamed," and walked away, like it was already decided. In a town where everyone knows everyone, the story of Grace and Daniel Miller would soon shake every home on Maple Street. But what truly happened behind their closed doors, no one was ready to hear. You're watching Dark Motives, where real stories of love, betrayal, and crime are told exactly how they happened. If you're new here, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we uncover cases that will leave you questioning what people are truly capable of behind closed doors. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. And as we go deeper into this case, I want you to pay attention to every small detail, because by the end, you'll realize this wasn't just another tragedy. It was a warning. Now let's go back to the beginning, before Grace's body started to fail her, before her husband Daniel became the man everyone would fear to speak about. Grace Miller was the kind of woman everyone loved to be around. Warm, kind, and soft-spoken. She worked as a preschool teacher at Maple Creek Elementary, where the children adored her. Her laughter carried through the halls like sunlight, and her calm spirit made her one of the most respected women in town. Her husband, Daniel Miller, owned a small hardware store his late father had built from scratch. To the public, he was a good man. Steady, polite, and faithful. The kind of husband people often praised as an example of stability. Together, Grace and Daniel were the picture of perfection. They attended church every Sunday, hosted quiet dinners, and posted cheerful family photos online. They smiled for the world, but behind their doors, something fragile was beginning to break. Grace's friends noticed the changes first. She stopped wearing her favorite perfume. She rarely stayed to talk after work. Her laughter, the one that used to fill every room, now sounded forced, faint, almost hollow. Daniel had changed too. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off his wife now barely looked at her. His voice carried less affection and more irritation. The distance between them grew wider every day, but no one around them dared to ask why. In Maple Creek, appearances mattered more than truth. And behind every perfect marriage photo, there was often a story no one wanted to believe. It began with discomfort, nothing too alarming at first. Grace thought it was stress, maybe exhaustion from long hours at work. But the pain grew sharper each day, followed by a strange smell she couldn't explain. At night, she would sit quietly on the bathroom floor, trying to understand what was happening to her body. She used every home remedy she could think of, hoping it would fade away. But it didn't. It only got worse. Daniel noticed, but he didn't ask questions. He avoided her. He started sleeping on the couch, saying he needed rest for work. When she tried to talk to him, he turned his face away. The same man who once cared for every detail of her life now acted like her presence made him uncomfortable. Grace cried in silence. She didn't want anyone to know. In a town like Maple Creek, gossip spreads faster than truth. She convinced herself it would pass, that she just needed time. But one morning, while getting ready for work, she noticed her reflection in the mirror. Her skin looked pale, her eyes tired, and there was something in her expression she hadn't seen before. Fear. That same day, she called her doctor. It was the first time she admitted out loud that something was wrong. She didn't know it yet, but that single decision would uncover a truth darker than she could have ever imagined. The doctor's office was cold and quiet. Grace sat in the corner, clutching her bag while the clock on the wall ticked louder with every passing second. When the doctor came in, his face said more than his words ever could. He spoke gently, choosing each word with care. He told her that an untreated infection had begun to spread. The tissue was breaking down inside her body. It needed immediate attention. Grace felt her chest tighten. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the diagnosis or the thought of telling Daniel. That evening when he came home, she told him everything. The words barely left her mouth before she saw the look in his eyes. Not concern, not compassion, just disgust. He stepped back, staring at her like she was something unclean. He asked if she had done something shameful, if she had betrayed him. His voice trembled, but not from worry, from anger. Grace tried to explain that the doctor said it was treatable, that she only needed care and rest. But Daniel wasn't listening. He was already lost in his own fear. The fear of what people might say, the fear of how it would look. That night, he locked himself in the guest room. Grace stayed awake on their bed, crying quietly into her pillow. She couldn't understand how love could turn to shame so fast. And as the days passed, his silence became louder than any argument they had ever had. Grace returned to the hospital for further tests. She was scared but hopeful that answers would bring healing. The doctors confirmed that the infection had started months ago. It had spread deeper than they thought. Her body was breaking down from the inside, slowly and painfully. They told her it could still be treated, but only if she began therapy immediately. Grace nodded, pretending to be strong, but she knew what was waiting at home. Daniel's silence had already become a wall she could no longer climb. When she told him the truth, he didn't say a word. He just stared at her. Then he left the room and didn't return until morning. He stopped touching her. He stopped eating at the same table. Even when she passed by him, he shifted away as if her presence carried a curse. Grace's mother tried to visit, but Daniel always found an excuse to keep people out. He said Grace needed rest, that she was fine, that everything was under control. But it wasn't. It was getting worse. Grace started hiding her medication. She couldn't bear the way he looked at her each time she swallowed a pill. Like her illness was an embarrassment, not a wound that needed care. Every night she prayed quietly, asking for a miracle, asking for her husband's heart to soften. But each morning, she woke up to the same silence, the same cold eyes, and the same fear that her body was running out of time. Whispers began to spread through Maple Creek. Neighbors noticed Grace hadn't been to church in weeks. Her students' parents started asking questions. People said they saw her lights on late at night, that she barely stepped outside. Daniel brushed off every rumor. He told anyone who asked that Grace was resting, that she was fine. But his calm tone only made people more curious. Grace could feel it. The way their neighbors looked at the house when they walked by. The way her phone rang less and less. She felt the world pulling away from her, like the town was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. One afternoon, the pastor's wife stopped by with a basket of fruit. Grace tried to smile, but the visit ended quickly. As soon as the woman left, Daniel locked the door and shouted at Grace for embarrassing him. He told her that people were starting to talk, that his business was losing customers, that everyone was asking questions he couldn't answer. Grace tried to explain that none of it was her fault, but Daniel wasn't listening. His mind had already turned her illness into a stain on his pride. From that day, he no longer saw her as his wife. He saw her as the reason for his shame. And as his fear grew, his love for her began to rot faster than the sickness inside her body. Daniel stopped sleeping. At night, he would sit in the living room with the lights off, staring at nothing. His mind replayed every whisper he had heard in town, every question people asked about Grace, every look of pity that cut through his pride. He started drinking again, something he had given up years ago. The sound of a bottle opening became part of the house's silence. Grace could hear him pacing through the night, muttering words she couldn't make out. When she tried to speak to him, he ignored her. When she cried, he told her to be quiet. One night, she walked into the living room and found him burning her old photographs. He said they didn't need reminders of what used to be. The man who once promised to protect her was gone. What stood before her now was someone consumed by fear and pride. Grace begged him to let her family visit. She told him she needed help, that she was getting weaker. He said no. He told her no one needed to see her like that she was better off staying inside until she was presentable again. She looked at him and realized that the man she married no longer saw her as human. He saw her as a reflection of his own shame. That night she prayed again, not for healing but for strength. She didn't know it yet, but her husband had already decided what he thought was best for both of them. It was raining that night, the kind of slow, quiet rain that made every sound echo through the house. Grace was sitting by the bathtub, her body weak, her breath uneven. She had stopped fighting the pain. She just wanted peace. Daniel walked into the room and stood behind her. For a long time he said nothing. The air between them was heavy, almost unbearable. She turned her head slightly and whispered his name, hoping that somewhere deep inside him there was still a trace of the man she loved. He didn't respond. His eyes were cold, distant, locked on the floor. He told her he couldn't live like this anymore, that people were talking, that their family name was drowning in shame. Grace tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. She told him she still loved him, that she could get better if he just helped her through it. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but it didn't matter. Daniel whispered the words she would never forget. Better dead than shamed. Grace froze. For a moment she thought she heard him wrong. But when she looked up, she saw it in his eyes. He meant every word. The next few moments were quiet. Too quiet. The neighbors would later say they heard nothing. No argument, no cry, just the steady sound of rain against the windows. By the time the sun rose, Grace was gone. Her body was found in the bathroom, still and pale, her hand resting on the edge of the tub as if she had been trying to stand. Daniel called no one. He sat on the couch, his hands trembling, his face empty. When the police finally arrived hours later, he didn't resist. He only said one thing. She's free now. Morning light crept through the curtains, touching the walls that had witnessed everything. When the officers entered the house, they found Daniel sitting in silence. The smell of alcohol lingered in the air. His hands were still trembling, his eyes empty, fixed on nothing. Grace's body was taken away gently, wrapped in white. The coroner's report later confirmed that her body had been failing for weeks. But what stood out wasn't just the infection, it was the neglect. The pain she had suffered alone. Detectives questioned Daniel for hours. He answered in short sentences, never raising his voice, never showing emotion. He said she was sick. He said he was trying to protect her. When asked what he meant by that, he fell silent. News spread fast through Maple Creek. People filled the streets outside the house, whispering, shaking their heads. The same neighbors who once admired the Millers now spoke in hushed tones, wondering how love could turn into something so cruel. The church held a vigil that week. Candles flickered in front of Grace's photograph, her smile frozen in time. The pastor spoke about forgiveness, about the danger of pride, about how silence can destroy more lives than lies ever could. Daniel was charged with second-degree murder. During the trial, he showed no emotion. When the verdict was read, he simply nodded, as if he had been waiting for that moment all along. Grace's mother wept quietly in the back row. She said the hardest part wasn't losing her daughter. It was knowing she died believing that shame was stronger than love. In the weeks that followed, the town tried to move on, but the house on Maple Street remained empty, untouched, a quiet reminder of what pride can do when it replaces compassion. Years later, people in Maple Creek still talk about Grace Miller. Her story became a quiet warning whispered in church pews and small gatherings, a reminder that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers, but from the people who promise to love us forever. Daniel is still serving his sentence. He rarely speaks to anyone. Some say he spends his days staring through the small window of his cell, whispering her name under his breath. Others say he feels no regret, that he still believes he did the right thing. No one truly knows. Grace's students, now grown, often visit her grave. They leave flowers, small drawings, and handwritten notes. One message reads, "You taught me what kindness looks like." In the end, this wasn't just the story of a marriage. It was the story of pride, fear, and the silence that destroys everything it touches. Grace didn't die from sickness alone. She died from the absence of love when she needed it the most. If you watched till this point, tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and share your thoughts. What do you think truly went through Daniel's mind that night? Don't forget to subscribe to Dark Motives and turn on the notification bell. Every day we uncover real stories that remind us how thin the line between love and darkness can be. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, not every smile hides peace. Sometimes it hides pain.